e4, e5, knight f3, and f6. This is the Damiano defense. And if you already know this opening, then you should know that it's bad. But did you know that the man it's named after also knew that? We're taking a look at one of the earliest and most important chess authors of all time. A man whose ideas helped shape the way chess was studied over 500 years ago. He wrote one of the earliest chess books ever printed, explored tactics and endgames that still hold up today, and may have understood something about chess centuries before modern engines ever existed. And he's most famous for an opening he didn't even recommend. I'm Coach Nick Pedretti, and this is the story of Pedro Damiano. Pedro Damiano was born around 1480 in Odemira, Portugal, and was a pharmacist by trade. It wasn't until about 1512, when he was 32 years old, that he published the book that would make his name last for centuries. When translated into English, the title of the book reads, "This book is for learning chess and for studying chess problems." Not exactly the most elegant title of all time, but to be fair, even today, we're not really naming books like poets either. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the Damiano defense. So e4, e5, knight f3, and f6. The worst way to defend the pawn once it's being attacked by the knight. We always want to say that we want to be aware whenever we're weakening the king's defense. If you don't know white's best move, I challenge you to take a look, try to find it. It is knight takes on e5. And black should probably do something to prepare for the attack that's about to come. However, the game that was shown about 500 years ago, and what most beginners or even intermediate players would play here, is of course taking the knight. But how do we follow up? We see that now the queen is free once the knight has gotten off of that f3 square. Check. And only two ways to respond. g6, of course, runs into the nasty fork. Yikes. And the much worse, if you want to hold on to your rook, king e7, which happened in the game. Of course, again, we still check. King moves over, and we always want to look for ways to introduce new pieces into the game. Of course, bishop c4. Now, funny enough, when I learned about this game or about this player, the variation I always looked at was king immediately to g6, because most beginner players wouldn't think that d5 is a response, right? Because it's so heavily attacked. Take it a step further though, you want to think about not only where the piece goes to, but the empty square it leaves behind. Really quick, if king g6, queen f5 really solidifies that mating net, forces the king to the edge. Can you see the next move that's coming up here? It is d3 or d4 for the discovery check. Let's say g5. Now that we have a pinned piece, we want to apply pressure to it. Of course, we want to play h4, putting that pressure down. Black can try to add more defense, but it's just definitely not going to work. Of course, taking here the discovery check, the double check, king g7, mate in 1. If you're familiar with Scholar's Mate, it's the same square, same two pieces involved as well. Queen to f7. Now, in Damiano's recorded game, his opponent actually does play d5. Okay, so after bishop takes and king to g6, we don't have this checking move anymore. Instead, Damiano doesn't play the most accurate move here, but still goes for something pretty scary. Obviously, f4 threatening f5. Black plays h6 to create an escape square. So check, king escapes. And now, to kind of the similar way that the queen moved in the last variation, bishop to f7, covering those squares, creating the mating net. Black tries to develop and add a little bit of protection to some fragile squares. Of course, that g7 square. And the queen drops back for a pretty nasty threat. Funny enough, the engine says that black has a way to defend this, and if you saw what was coming up, you could probably find this move too. However, his opponent did not. Played a simple developing move like knight to c6. And can you find the combination here? Yeah, it is queen to g6, queen sacrifice. Knight has to take, and we put the baby to bed with g6. Nasty. So Damiano clearly knew that f6 was bad. So why did his name get attached to the opening? Well, other than the fact that he was probably one of the first to even talk about this opening, there might be another reason, and it has to do with a chess player you might already be familiar with, Ruy Lopez. In 1561, several years after Damiano had already passed away, Ruy Lopez published his own chess book, and in it, he spent quite a bit of time criticizing Damiano's analysis. And Lopez had some good points. Not everything Damiano said was absolutely perfect, even to today's scrutiny. However, he was not very subtle with the way that he felt about him. At one point, he even mocked Damiano in a way that basically amounts to, "This man must have been asleep while writing this." And look, no one was perfect back then. Even Ruy Lopez had some ideas that I personally don't agree with. He said at one point that you should win if you just capture all your opponent's pieces, or if your opponent stalemates. That should be a win for you. Not really agreed upon nowadays. Now, have you ever heard the quote, "If you see a good move, look for a better move"? By Emanuel Lasker, right? Well, you might be surprised to hear that Damiano wrote this 500 years earlier. And in his second only recorded game in history, he shows those principles put to work. Let's take a look. Okay, so it starts with a standard Petrov e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. Takes, and black should be playing d6 here, but they play the second best move, which is first taking. You have to be very careful with this trap, very common trap after queen e2. Some people will run their knight backwards, but then you have this discovery idea, knight c6, of course winning the queen. So instead, black actually does play the theory here, which is queen e7. And it looks like you're just blundering a knight, right? Totally free knight, but black has the response of d6. And obviously you can't move the knight because it hangs the queen. So d4 here. Next couple of moves get a bit strange. More pressure on the knight. We've talked about this before, moving that f pawn. And white just adds more defense. So nothing too crazy. Black develops a piece. Again, this whole time, right, we can take the knight. We don't necessarily have to take the knight. The knight still is not going anywhere. So black can afford to just keep playing in between moves. Knight d7, knight c3. White just continues to develop. And just with that simple knight to c3 move, we have something coming up very shortly. After takes, now, of course, we have ways that we can capture back. But whenever you see a good move, look for a better move. The in-between, the intermezzo, knight d5. And brutal, of course, because now it's attacking the queen, it's attacking the pawn. Queen goes to d6, trying to maintain some of that protection on the center. So white takes, black takes, white takes, and you have to be very careful because, of course, even though there are two attackers and only one defender, well, if we take with the queen, there's no longer a person defending on c7, and we get the fork. And you probably should take with the knight. I think black was just afraid of the upcoming bishop to c4, creating the pinned piece pressure. It's pinned this way, it's pinned that way. So makes sense why black didn't take, but obviously we have to move our queen. We have to keep control of the c7 square. So queen c6. And go ahead, take a second here, see if you can find the devastating move that Damiano plays against his opponent. It is bishop to b5. Ooh. Yeah, totally sacrificing a bishop. Idea being it is a deflection tactic, getting away from that c7 square. If you are to take it, knight takes, and it is a royal fork. And regardless, black is running out of squares. Doesn't really matter. Queen c5. How do we put the baby to bed? Not a lot more squares the queen can go to where it's still protecting the pawn here. Bishop e3. And funny enough, now black takes the bishop. Nothing more to be done here. We already talked about it. Knight to c7. Black resigns. So pretty cool little tactic here. Two tactics. One of them being that in-between move, that setup move. How strong that knight was on d5. And then the very beautiful bishop sacrifice. Bishop to b5. Pretty cool, pretty good if this is your second only game ever recorded in history. Not too bad. All right, so in addition to those two games, he had over 70 puzzles in his book. And I looked through a lot of them, and one of them was a bit familiar to me, which I'll show to you. And then I also, of course, want to end this video with his own puzzled mate. So he had a very special checkmating pattern that was in his book, and now all the future puzzles that use this specific pattern, they have to call it the Damiano's mate. So there was a bit of a positive there, even though his opening, not so good. His checkmate pattern, it's actually pretty cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at those two puzzles. So this is the puzzle. It is a forced mate in 5. Pause the video, take as much time as you need, but for some reason, when he made this one, and he made tons of puzzles in his book, this one, people loved it. So they named this kind of tactic after him. This sort of forcing combination where you're eventually getting the piece to where it wants to go. Because if you've realized, well, if I want to transport any of my pieces to any square, I would love to get my queen to h7. And luckily there is a forcing combination to do so. Starts, of course, rook check, sacrificing the rook, king takes, rook check, king over, another rook is sacrificed, king over, there we go, now we get the queen check, king over, and queen h7. Not something you would see in a regular game, so it really is interesting to think about how did they come up with these ideas. Did they actually have a game where something like this happened? Were they just sitting around at a board and messing around until they found something cool? That is Damiano's mate. All right, bonus puzzle for you guys. This one, I'm not going to spoil it just yet. Maybe not, you've seen this before, but this looked really familiar to me. It's white to move. We have dueling pawn promotion. What is going to be the move? All right, so it's a win, and I would say 1, 2, 3, 4 moves, 5. So it's a bit of a combination. Can you see it? Again, pause the video as long as you'd like. Of course, here, white pushes, black pushes, white pushes, black pushes, white promotes, and black promotes. Okay. If you're not familiar with this tactic, you should be, because white has the winning move. It is a skewer. That's the hint. The shish kebab move. A7. Cutting through. And of course, king has to move out of the way. And we pick up the queen now. Do you know what this reminds me of? What does it remind you of? If you have ever seen Searching for Bobby Fischer, that classic movie, the final game has this not exact tactic, but something extremely similar, where there's the dueling, pawn promotion. Funny enough, in that game, black actually promotes first, and then white promotes with the check, and it's so cinematic. I'll show it here. The camera dropping down, you see, the king has to move out of the way, and then the kid who's playing Jeremy Silman's character just wham attacks that, just captures that queen. It's a great scene. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is a little bit of information on Damiano, Pedro Damiano. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. Please let me know in the comments if you have a certain chess player that you want me to really deep dive. I was shocked to find that, of course, there was a lot of studies about Damiano's defense, Damiano's mate, but not a lot going into the exact history. And I found it to be, I had a lot of fun researching this, especially the little tidbits about Roy Lopez as well. I might dive into him on a future video. So please, any feedback will really help me in the next one. Thank you for watching. Coach Nick signing off. Keep playing chess, guys.